this has gotten kind of dark from just a story about a guy wanting a sandwich, but that's what the scene sheet will do, eh? Hello, everyone. Today, we are continuing our series on how to write a scene using my own personal scene sheet as a part of my blank page protocol. Today, I am going over page 2 of the sheet, so if you haven't seen the first video, you can check that out here. And to download your own copy, please click the link in the description. Here is a quick refresher of the scene that we have been building. A character named Bill is eating a ham sandwich, which our main character, Bob, wants to eat. Now, in the first video, we discovered, by using the scene sheet, that Bob in fact kills Bill for his sandwich. Now, page 1 is all about the basic structures of scene writing, but page 2 will give you a ton of additional resources for really breathing life into your scene. Okay, here we are on page 2. We're just going to go through the elements one by one, and I'll explain to you how to use them and how you can start to bake them into your scenes. So at the very top, we have two ideas. One here on the left is tone, which actually comes from a book by Frances Hodges, a book on theater directing. It's the one word that encapsulates the essence of your scene. So in fact, we're not going to fill this out now. We want to fill this out toward the end once we have a better vibe of what we're going for. The second thing I have labeled radical shift and tempo. There's a principle I learned from an old teacher of mine named Daniel Stein of radical shifts in direction of energy. So you want to think about that principle both between scenes and within scenes. If you have a really super quiet, slow scene, maybe the next scene is a blowout, as an okay example. There are a lot of exceptions to this, as there are a lot of exceptions to everything, but the point for you is to think about the tempo of your scene. So as you can see in radical shift in tempo, I have 3 boxes. The lowest is what I will call just slow, middle is medium, top is fast. You can get really clever with this and give it the names that musicians use in their symphonies, piano for very slow, that kind of thing. All I do is put in dots from left to right of what I want the speed of my scene to be. So if you look at my cursor, perhaps the scene starts really slow, and then tension escalates, and then there's a climax, and then it goes back down. Or maybe your scene wants to be slow the entire time. Or maybe your scene is super duper fast, or whatever. The point is for you to just actually start thinking about pace and tempo as you write. The next section also comes from Hodges. It's called Opening Character Mood Intensity. It is for describing the state of your character at the beginning of your scene. And we do this actually physiologically, because that's how we kind of experience emotions too, feelings in our gut, feelings in our chest and our arms and our body. It doesn't get quite that specific, but it'll just prime you a little bit to know, hey, where is my character at physically in this scene? So for us, the opening heartbeat of Bob trying to get this sandwich, well, we established in the previous video that he's starving to death, so we'd have to do some research. It's either very low or very high. Any doctors out there? Let's just say high. Keep the stakes high. Stomach condition, as empty as it can be, right? Breathing rate and depth. Is it shallow? Is it fast? What's it like? We'll say fast and shallow. Perspiration, again, you would really want to get specific in your research on this. I'm not sure if someone who's starving to death has much perspiration to give. Maybe it's he's sweat a lot and now it's dried, so let's just say he's dry. He's strangely dry. Muscle tension, maybe he knows he's about to get into a conflict with Bill. Maybe it's very tight and taut, so we'll say that, tight and taut. Again, this isn't about getting right answers or anything like that. You just want to start using the sheet to help prime your imagination. Demeanor, This actually brings up another point I want to make, that throughout this sheet, you want to be thinking about contrasts. You want to be thinking about times when something appears to be different than what it actually is. So, what I like, the reason I put demeanor in here is this person is starving to death. He really wants this sandwich, but maybe he comes in smiling, putting on an air of relaxation, right? So we'll say nonchalant, just kind of interesting. But you know that something else is going on physically. Okay, next section, sensory overload plus a mood adjective. This is to help you incorporate all five senses into your scene, to really be making sure, even if you're writing a screenplay, which is largely visual, that you're still taking responsibility for the sensory experience of your scene for your reader or your audience. And before we begin this, you might actually want to think about a setting. I'm going to go ahead and do that because that'll just give us a bunch of ideas. So let's just choose a setting. I think that Bob is going to encounter Bill on the top of a building, like a skyscraper kind of thing, like an action movie kind of vibe, where Bill is eating his ham sandwich. So let's build out the sensory experience from there. So I wrote some notes down already for this, so I'm just going to copy them out. So for sight, I have night sky, light pollution seeping up into the sky, the city below. And the second part of the sensory overload is that you also can give it a word or adjective that kind of captures what that sensory experience means. So for me, there's a sense of emptiness and somehow amorality too. There doesn't feel like there's a right and wrong up here. Um, right? This is for me. This is fun. Maybe that'll never come across, but I like the sort of sense of this emptiness. Sound. Well, we have Bill is chewing the sandwich. You could really heighten that. Distant traffic, probably. Grinding construction, like what is always outside my apartment. Um, this, I think, I'm going to put irritation for this. There's a sort of gnawing anxiety in the air between these men from this this hum of the city. Next, we have smell. Again, the ham sandwich. You want to really have a grip on that main prop. We have pollution, maybe pollution, smog, steam from a vent. I don't know what that stuff is or if it even has a smell. Um, but that sort of came to my mind as something you see on those buildings, and that could also be part of sight. Um, with smell, I think there's a sense of nausea, I guess, from this. Like the ham sandwich combined with the smog, and also this guy hasn't eaten for days and days. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting from the smell category. Touch. Well, we have concrete, perhaps, on the top. We have metal. We have. Well, that's all I have for right now, and that's fine. This can be what the characters actually touch, or just what the setting is. Let's leave that for now. And I have a coldness to that, because you'll recall Bob is going to whack Bill at the end of this scene, so maybe there's some sun frost, some cold-bloodedness to that act that can be reflected in the touch of this place. Taste. Well, we could go down to the characters' individual points of view. I mean, Bob probably has a dry mouth, empty mouth, no saliva in there. Bib. Whoops. No saliva in there. Maybe a salt, kind of a salty taste that can happen when your mouth is empty. And this to me is all about his desperation. And if you go back to the first page when we talked about characters' desires, now we have sort of a physical thing that connects to those desires. So Let's talk a little bit about sixth sense. I put this category in because even once you have a bunch of concrete things that you can draw on for a description, there still might be some extra je ne sais quoi in the scene that gives it a certain essence, you know? There's murder in the air here. Um, I also combined it with this word tension just to remind you that really beat by beat, it's better to have things be as tense as possible. I'll have a whole other video on how to build characters, and I'll be sharing my character sheets, little bits at a time. But for now, let's just say that there's animosity in the air, that perhaps Bob and Bill aren't strangers, but old enemies. Maybe they're brothers. That always jacks up the stakes if they have an actual relationship. Oh, twins. How about that? That's a strange sort of additional emotional layer. And the sixth sense tension category can kind of help you get there. Okay, so the next category is activate movement. What does that mean? Well, you don't want people, places, things in your scene to remain static. Remember, when you're writing a story, things should be moving through time and space. I think it's easy to kind of forget that. So you want to ask yourself first, well, what's moving in this scene? So Bob will get ever closer to Bill. Let's see what else I have. He will attack Bill at some point, probably grab the sandwich. I can picture him maybe shoving the sandwich down Bill's throat or vice versa. I don't have that necessarily worked out, but you again, these categories are for you. You just put stuff in that you think maybe could happen, and then you can draw on them later on when you write. Okay, next category is extreme to limit. To limit means, are you pushing things to their limit? And what do I mean by that? If something has a certain energy or essence, are you pushing it as far as possible? Because the truth is, art lives in the extremes. You don't just want things to be pedestrian. You don't want things to happen that kind of happen to all of us every day. Extreme sort of uh, evokes something of a heightened intensity, but something can also be extremely quiet or extremely gentle, right? Extreme is just about saying, what is this thing and how can I make it more of itself to really make it pop? So I think their animosity should be just very, very, very tense at the beginning of this. I don't know the backstory yet, but I think there's just contempt between them. We'll really bump that up. I think maybe Bob, or actually Bill's manipulative abilities, I'd like to really play up. Sort of discovering this now. He's some sort of sociopath who's eating this sandwich. Bill can be a really evil guy. You can have fun with that one. Really just enjoy kind of discovering what you can push to the limit in your scene. Living setting. Another reminder. The setting too needs to feel alive. And the good news is we just went over all the senses and all the stuff that's happening in there to really help you breathe life into where we are. So we already discovered wafting steam, just wafting in front of Bob or Bill or something. Maybe a pigeon is there at some point, flying around or landing. There could be a rat eating a crumb or eating something even grosser, some slimy piece of trash or something. A lot of the stuff on this page you write down, and it's not that you put all of it into the scene. It's just that as you're writing, you go, huh, I don't know what happens next. and you have a detail to draw on to heighten the tension, to advance the scene. Next category, objects for improvisation and gestures. Storytelling is often best told through objects, not just language, not just dialogue. It's one thing to say to your wife, I'm divorcing you and I no longer love you, versus picking up her favorite lamp and throwing it across the room and smashing it, right? The lamp that really meant something to her and meant something to you and meant something to your relationship and is charged with all that same energy. The visual thing we'll remember more than the thing that's said. And it also covers that classic writerly advice to show rather than tell. So I want you to just start thinking before you write this scene, what objects in this world are there and how could they be used? How could they be deployed in kind of creative ways to advance your story? So we discovered this a little earlier. I have this notion of Bill, how about shoving the ham sandwich down Bob's throat in the fight? He doesn't need it. He's well fed, whatever. The ham sandwich something has to happen to the ham sandwich that advances our story. It's the main object of this scene. And depending on how absurd you want to be, it could play a part throughout this fight. But I just have this image of once the physical fighting starts, it's almost like Bill's like, you want it so bad? Here's a sandwich, and tries to choke him. What objects are there? How can you start playing with them? Next section, ritual. So I could do an entire video on rituals. Rituals are hugely important to human affairs, and therefore they're hugely important to stories. Now, rituals don't have to be just some elaborate religious affair. Everyone has rituals on every level of their life. The chair you sit in before you have your first coffee of the day is a ritual. The important thing about rituals is that they transform us in some way. The great example I always like to use is actually at a Catholic Mass and the consumption of the Eucharist. This is a weekly ritual in which the believers in Jesus actually consume his body, kind of reaffirming the entire faith. It's a great use of an object that transforms the sinner into the saved, and in this one room that is repeatable every time. That's a good example of a more heightened ritual, but again, this can be anything. For the purposes of your scene, I just add ritual. Maybe the scene itself is a ritual. Maybe you are writing a scene about some sort of satanic ring or whatever, and you're stepping into the pentagram and someone's about to be sacrificed. Or maybe your scene does start with someone simply brushing their teeth, but you add the word ritual to remind yourself that they do it in a very specific way that's specific to their character, that's going to put them in another state. And maybe that gets interrupted, for example. So a ritual that just I came up with for this is that, in fact, at the beginning of the scene, perhaps Bill is making the ham sandwich. That also gives us some nice movement. We've all made a ham sandwich. Split the bread, you spread the mayo or the mustard, what ingredients go on there, what are piled on there. How do you put together a sandwich when you're prepared to eat? That could be the beginning of the scene, and that could be what Bob interrupts. Also, we're using our object for improvisation. A sandwich doesn't just exist, it has to be made. Maybe we see that sandwich being made. So these next two sections are a little bit of secret sauce. I'm talking about time collapse, options narrowing, irreversible, and cost. What are these here for? You can write a perfectly good scene and story where a character just wants something and is thwarted and tries to get it again. But the problem with that kind of writing is that stories can have a tendency to reset. I didn't get what I wanted, but I'm still generally okay. Now I'll just try again. And actually, if you want your story to rise in tension, if that's the kind of thing you're going for, over the course of it, from scene to scene, at the end of it, you want your character to have less options and less time. And as you get even further into your story, there are going to have to be some irreversible events, things that characters can't come back from. It could be that at the end of this scene, Bob doesn't get the sandwich, Bill throws it over the roof, and he's actually stuck, starving, and unable to eat, rather than giving him that satisfaction and the audience that satisfaction of actually surviving. We make it even worse. So I'm going to put that as an option. Bob, Bill discards sandwich. Bob still starving to death. And now it's even worse. Instead of having maybe hours to live, maybe he now has minutes. Where do we go from here? One option. So we talked about how Bob kills Bill at the end of this scene. I think that's a great example of an irreversible act that also comes at great cost. Bill is dead. Can't take that back unless he's Lazarus. And the cost of killing someone is, for lack of a better phrase, Bob has lost his soul. I'm not saying literal soul, I just mean figuratively. Once you cross that red line into being a murderer, you've certainly paid a heavy price, and that price might be your humanity. Boy, this has gotten kind of dark from just a story about a guy wanting a sandwich, but that's what the scene sheet will do, eh? Now, you've reached this point. You've written the first page, you have your structure, you've written the second page, giving yourselves a lot of ideas, a lot of raw clay. What I like to now do is put the scene sheet in a drawer, sleep the night away, come back, and at my writing time the next day, I take out the scene sheet, I go through and I just highlight stuff that sticks out to me, highlight stuff that interests me. And stuff that I wrote that isn't too interesting, I just sort of let go. I put it down and then clear my mind and write the scene. That's just how I do it. You could, if you wanted to, just keep your scene sheet right next to you and draw on it exactly. But I actually like to think of it more of as a priming mechanism. It's just given me a lot of ideas that I can then draw on as needed as I write. So you've now written the scene. The last section of the scene sheet is a scene check. Now, I don't put this beforehand because we already have a structural component on the first page, but I just like to do another scene check that uses another paradigm to make sure that the scene is functioning properly, that it's moving the plot forward, that something happens, that there's a change, all the stuff we talked about in the first video. So this actually comes from David Ball's book, Backwards and Forwards. This is another book for theater directors, but is pertinent to all storytellers. We have stasis, intrusion, reversal, and new stasis. Very simple. Stasis is just the state of being at the beginning of the scene. There's equilibrium. Everything is as it should be. Bill is making his sandwich. Next, the intrusion is the thing that starts the scene. And again, we're pretending that we've written this. So I look back and I say, oh, the thing that ignites the scene, Bob arrives. Great. Now, reversal. So it's essentially the turning point of the scene. This actually could be two moments that we've sort of explored. One could be where Bill discards the ham sandwich and Bob is truly out of options and that ignites him to kill Bill. Or it could be when he actually kills Bill. So we'll put in both. Bill tosses the sandwich and Bob kills him. Interesting. So the new stasis is the new equilibrium that has been established by the end of this scene. So Bob is staring at Bill's dead body, still starving to death. Now we have a stasis for our next scene, and we just have to figure out, well, what's going to intrude a decision, an event, an appearance to create the next scene. New information and choice. Last video, I talked about Jordan Rosenfeld's great book, How to Write a Page Turner. This comes from that. And her thesis is that every scene should give a character new information. Do we learn something new in this scene that helps them advance toward their overall goal? Again, you don't have to have all this stuff in every scene, but I like to put this check in just to make sure, do I actually want new information to come in this scene? And going back to our cheesy kind of example, maybe this is where Bob finds out they are twins right before he kills him or something. Choice. Is there a choice in this scene? Decisions are hugely important to character development and plot advancement. I just like to make sure, did someone have to make a choice? So actually it helps in this scene because maybe there is a moment of hesitation that Bob has before he kills Bill. Maybe he hears that they're twins, but this man has just thrown away his sandwich and his last chance at life, and he has a choice. What do I do now? Do I get revenge on this man who just said he was my twin? You get the idea. So the choice was, actually, Bob chooses to kill Bill. And that choice makes him lose his soul. Murder can also, of course, be something that just happens, but let's just add this as an example of a good, juicy choice that someone could make. So this idea of picturization also comes from Hodges, and my own understanding of it might have drifted a little bit from him, but I think of it as the image that you can take from your scene, which encapsulates it in its entirety, where objects and composition and gesture and setting and drama all come together to visually give you a snapshot of that story. For us, that's probably the moment we already wrote, where Bill is shoving the ham sandwich into Bob's mouth and almost choking him. I'm not sure. There are a lot of different options. We didn't actually write the scene, but let's just go ahead and put that in. Bill shoving sandwich down Bob's throat. Maybe while he's hanging over the edge, something. Cognitive effect. So this comes from a brilliant man named Agnes Fletcher, who wrote an audiobook or a series of lectures on Screenwriting 101. And his thesis is that every movie we actually enjoy because it achieves a certain cognitive effect on us. An example he gives of this is Star Wars, and the cognitive effect, I believe, for Star Wars is big wonder. Really fascinating series of lectures. I suggest you check it out when you get a chance. But I went ahead and slipped it in the scene sheet because I wonder if at the end of every scene we also want to have had a cognitive effect on our audience. We want them to be feeling a certain way. And we reread our scene and we say, how does this affect me? Let's just check that out. To me, at the end, if Bob is just sitting there without a sandwich and without a brother, listening to the traffic go by, there's a nihilistic tragedy, tragic nihilism. So we really want the audience to feel like, oh, what was the meaning of all this and how pointless and how awful. This is what you got to do to your audience if you want to write good scenes. Then the final words down here are additional sort of checks. These are super subjective. It's, again, not about checking things like you check your grocery list. It's just to help you deepen your scene on the next rewrite. So we talked about contrasts already. I want to be rereading the scene thinking, am I finding interesting ways to contrast different events or energies or whatever? And just asking that question might give you some cool ideas. Excavate, resonance, and honesty are actually three words that Stephen King gives in his book, his great book on writing. Stephen King doesn't actually outline, but he likens it to excavation, to slowly brushing away the dirt to reveal a fossil. And I think that's almost in a way a better word and a more specific word than just discovery. And a reminder to me that when I write scenes, even though I do this whole scene sheet, am I still doing so in a spirit of excavating, of finding something new? And I think if you're doing the scene sheet right, you should be making discoveries as you write that didn't even appear on your scene sheet. Again, they're just for priming you, they're just for helping you. But when you really let it rip, you want to be finding new things. Resonance and honesty are his two other categories. Resonance, Stephen King uses as kind of a gut check. Does it actually resonate with you? Did you just write something using the scene sheet and is it just sort of bland and technical and crossing all these T's and dotting all these I's? Or when you look at it again and you read it, do you go, oh, that gets me, that resonates? Honesty, I think, is another great word he uses. And I think it's a better word than truthful for what we're going for. Truth is huge and hard to comprehend. But what we can do as writers, what we can do as storytellers and artists, is we can write honestly from what we believe. Are we really being honest in what we write? Is this really what we think? Does this really express how the world works from our perspective? Similar to resonance, but kind of overlapping and different in its own ways. And I think for me, even though I started with this silly scene, I do have a darker streak, and there is something really honest about someone who's willing to kill someone out of spite and then kind of lose their soul. So, another good check for your scene. Black magic is a phrase that Edward Albee used. He would probably see this scene sheet and call it ridiculous because he never did anything like this. He would just write, and if you asked him, well, how did you do that? Can you share with me your thoughts and your technique? Albee would say, this is indescribable. This is what we do as writers is black magic. This is the most subjective and toughest kind of check on a checklist to have. But I think if I'm really writing well, I'm getting to something even deeper than what I anticipated. I've created something beyond not just the scene sheet, but beyond even what I thought I was capable of. That's what black magic is to me. And this last word is just a simple fun. It's a reminder that at the end of the day, we are playing pretend. This is a jungle gym, and we are kids running around pretending to be pirates. I don't come from the school of art that says you have to suffer, even if you're doing highly personal art based off highly traumatic things. In that case, the better word might be joy. That joy encompasses more of the human experience that isn't necessarily pleasant, but exploring it is ultimately enriching in a way that's important. So, fun, joy. Are you just executing this? Are you just knocking off a to-do list again? Or are you still enjoying yourself, having fun? That is it on page 2 of the scene sheet. I hope you enjoyed. And again, you can download a copy in the link. If you have any questions for me personally, you can also email me at bruff@bruffhanson.com. That email and its proper spelling is also on my channel page. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think, and if you use the scene sheet, how it worked for you. Bye.